2 years ago, I left Scandinavia and moved to Los Angeles. And in this video, I'm going to share all the things you need to know before moving to the US. Everything from getting the visa, but also all the practical things when you arrive in the US and how to have a good start on your new life on the other side of the planet. So let's get into it. 3-4 years ago, I made the decision I wanted to move to the US. And the first thing was, of course, to get a visa to the US. And I made other videos here on the channel where I talk more in detail about visas. But I'll just give you a quick intro to it in this video, and you can check out some of my other videos where I talk more about it. Basically, the visa I have is the O1A visa. Basically, what this means is just that you are one of the best in your field, whether it is to be an entrepreneur, it is an athlete, a musician, or a scientist, or whatever other thing. So that is like one way to go. This one does require some paperwork and take some time, but it is also a really good visa because it's also going to give you the path to green card. So there's a good option. Then there's the E2 visa, which is like the investor's visa. Here you have to make a substantial investment. Often it's a minimum of around $100,000, and then you get a 2-year visa. So this can also be a good option. And then there's the H-1B visa, which is like specialized worker, though this one just got more difficult because of Trump's new changes with this penalty of $100,000. But this one is being used a lot in, let's say, the Bay Area, where they need some developers and other things like that. So that is also a way to go. And then there's other ways, such as studying in the US or be a trainee in the US. There's also visas for that. So there is like different ways to get your foot into the US. But that's basically the first thing, of course, to have a visa before getting here. Then the next thing you need to prepare for is that you're not going to see your family that much. So for my sake, I try to go back 3-4 times a year, which I think is more than most people. But because I'm an entrepreneur and I have a flexible lifestyle, it is possible for me to take a flight back, let's say 3 times a year. It's at Christmas and the summer, and then either in the spring or the fall. And this works pretty well, but of course I miss my parents a lot and my family, and this is something you need to accept. This is the terms, that when you move to the other side of the globe, then it will be different. And of course, all you can do here is that you can have a lot of video calls, you can try to motivate your family to come and visit you. But on the other hand, I would also say that there is a lot of people that live in the same country, but they don't see each other that often just because maybe it's 3 hours away or 4 hours away. So sometimes I also wonder, like, how different would it actually be? Of course, one thing that is annoying is the time difference. And again, yeah, I would see them more if I was living in Germany or somewhere closer to Denmark, my home country. I feel I have a somewhat good setup here, but of course, if you get a full-time job in the US, then maybe you'll only be able to go back once a year. But this is something you need to decide in your head what you can live with. If you really need to go back to your home country a lot, then maybe this can be a challenge. Then the next thing is that you need a lot of money. The US is really expensive, super expensive, a lot more expensive than Europe and many other places in the world. So you need to save up some money. I would recommend $100,000 as a good buffer so that you have some time so you can survive for some time in case you're just starting to build your career and not making so much money in the beginning. Then $100,000 should be a good safety for some time. But of course, less can also do it, but try to aim for $100,000 because again, you need to maybe buy a car, you have a high rent and then maybe other things you need to buy or invest in, and then easily it can just go away like that. So, you need to have some money before going. Then the next thing on the list is credit score. And maybe you've heard about it, but you don't really understand what it actually is. And it is also a little difficult to really explain before you actually have your own credit cards and bank account. But basically what it's all about is that you are able to pay off debt in time. And then the more you do this, the more credit they'll give you. So you'll get a lot more credit in the US if you pay things off in time. So if I should give you one example, when I moved to the US, first I got a secured credit card because I didn't have any credit history. So this is kind of just like, let's call it a debit card. And then after like 4 or 5 months or something, I tried to apply for my first credit card. I started using that one because it was in my interest to use this one, both because there were some benefits on this card, because this is normal in the US that there's a lot of benefits on the card. You get points, you get insurances and things like that. So it was in my interest to use this card. And then the more I would use this, the more my credit score would go up because I showed that every time I spent money, I paid off. And then the whole idea is that the more you do this, the more credit you can get, so that if you need to buy a house someday, then the banks can help you. And that's kind of how the whole system works. But this is something you first really learn when you're here and you have your first credit card and understand the logic, because this is like a whole system and a whole logic that is very different from Europe. So this is something that is kind of a bit of a learning process getting into. Then the next thing is that you need to adapt to the US culture. And like any other country, there's traditions and you need to understand how people interact and all of these things. But again, this is something you can't really prepare too much for. I think my learning and my advice to you is that try to be proactive in anything that is US culture, and try to learn about, like, it could be the 4th of July, it can be Thanksgiving, it can also just be to try to socialize more with Americans and try to really understand how the culture works and being invited to different events. This is really a good way to really get into the US culture and really understand it, because I think when you get closer to it, you'll also appreciate it more versus having a bit of a distant relationship from it. And then there's smaller things such as you need to get used to drive a lot. In many cities in the US, you need to drive a lot, you need to commute a lot, and this is part of life. A lot of people, they have a job where they commute for 1 hour each way every day. This is not the case for me, but for a lot of people, this is normal, and this is kind of different from Europe, where we don't commute as much, I would say. But this is more common here. Of course, again, it depends on where in the US you're gonna settle. But as an example, LA is a good example where people commute a lot, because it does take a long time to get around, because the city is so spread out and so big. And speaking of that, forget about public transportation. Cities like New York, of course, and also other major cities have a good infrastructure with public transportation. But in general, you should expect to drive. This is a country for driving. I personally also like driving, so for me it's not a problem, but this is something to get used to. You cannot live in LA or San Francisco or Miami and not have a car. I mean, I know you can find some people that is really willing to go their way to do that. For the majority, no. You need a car to get around, because that is the way the society built, that's the structure of the cities. Be prepared that it is really expensive. The US is super expensive, and that's also why I said you need to have at least $100,000, because you will have to pay a lot for rent, going to restaurants, for whatever other things, insurances. It can easily add up, so you need a lot of money. It is really expensive, and I would recommend you to make a Google Sheet or like Excel, even though I know it doesn't sound very exciting, but it is a good thing to do, because the worst thing that can happen is that you get your visa, and then after 6 months you need to go back to your home country because you ran out of money. And a lot of people do that because they're not prepared enough, and that is a little too bad. So this is something really to be aware of. Be careful with that, because it can go really fast, because it is super expensive. I also here have some price examples where you can see how much it costs in the US versus Europe. So I hope you liked this video. I hope it gave you a bit of insight before you start your process. Of course, the first thing is to get the visa if you're actually about to start the process. I would recommend Deal, as I mentioned. I also added links in the description that you can check out, and you can have a call with them. And it's just a 20-30 minute call. They're gonna give you some input if you can get a visa or not. I would recommend scheduling a call. So that will be the first step. And then, as I mentioned, save up money, be well prepared that things are more expensive. It will be a very different life than the one you have in Europe. But again, why not take this challenge, and then you can always go back if things doesn't work out. Again, I hope you like this video. Please hit the like and subscribe button. That would help me a lot make more videos like this. I would love to share more experiences from the US and help more people that is dreaming of moving to the US or have questions about the US. Then I'm happy to help. I'm Christopher, and I'll see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye.